Hey guys, welcome back to Telltale. I'm Emily,
Greg.
and today we are going to be doing a topic video on hype in literature
And publishing.
and publishing. Man, there's a lot to talk about today. This is
Mhm.
going to be fun.
So I can't remember which one of us chose this topic. It's a topic video, no review here. We're discussing general trends that we've seen. And you know, you hear a lot about books being new release books being extremely hyped. And to some extent, I even see some of the fantasy booktube channels will
Mm-hmm.
kind of gang up and all hype one of the older books all at once,
Mm-hmm.
which is both good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's bad because they all basically say the same thing. It's like they're trying to sell.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it comes across, like they're trying to sell everybody on this book.
Mm-hmm.
But it is good that they're looking back to books from the 1980s and talking about them and
Mm-hmm.
trying to keep those books alive.
Yeah.
Here at Telltale, we talk about stuff from the 1880s and try to keep them
Yeah.
alive. So we're all about that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, good and bad things with that. The bad thing is just that hype train.
Yeah.
Bunch of people who are influential ganging up and saying, we think this is the greatest book ever. And then a lot of people just go, yeah, I got to read that.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah. And there's nothing to say that as a younger person, a lot of the reason I have read things is because an older generation, someone or several people in an older generation have told me, I think you would enjoy this. If you liked that, from what I understand, you would probably like this too. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that introduction from another generation or that introduction to something that's old and it becoming kind of new again.
I'm glad.
Yeah, which is fantastic. Like I love that. And I think there's something to be said of that because I don't want to be a gatekeeper. Like that happens in the
Right.
music community, I think a lot where people are like at the Paris Olympics, Gojira played was the metal band that played at the opening ceremony
Okay.
with the opera singer. And
Hmm.
Gojira's been around a long time.
Hmm.
But so many young people are like, "Oh my gosh, Gojira!" Like because they got the publicity, suddenly young people were listening to them and they were trending.
Hmm.
And then all these older generation people are just like, really? Like, come on, they've been around a lot longer than just at the Paris Olympics. Like, they didn't just exist that day. They have decades worth of music,
Well, that
you
happened
know?
with Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah.
Uh, what's the name of that movie that they were singing it in their car?
Bohemian Rhapsody. I don't know.
The two guys from Saturday Night Live, the
Oh.
characters from Saturday Night Live, they made a
Mm-hmm.
movie of them,
Yeah.
and the names are not, or because I'm so terrible with
Yeah.
names, but
I
they
think every
did,
time a biopic comes up, like
yeah.
suddenly everybody's listening or reading or
Mhm.
whatever to the person about that biopic, which great. There's a reason they have a biopic. It's
Yeah.
because their life was fascinating and for some reason they were important enough
Hmm.
to pop culture that they needed that.
Or like Dune, somebody, Villeneuve makes a movie of it in two parts, and all of a sudden these books that we were buying for 50 cents at the resale shops are selling for
Yeah.
$3,000.
Yeah. Or what was it, Shogun?
Yeah,
The
the
show
same
came
thing
out.
happened with that.
Yeah.
Try and get a copy of that
And
now.
I think that is a
It's crazy.
natural reaction for people to be like, "Oh, I want the source material."
Hmm.
I think that is normal and natural, and I think that's a good thing because good things deserve to keep surviving
Hmm.
and keep being a part of culture, especially
Yeah.
if they have something important to say or something
Hmm.
important to contribute. What happens though is the eventually the horse dies and then they beat it.
Yeah.
Like I've actually stopped at altogether pretty much listening to booktube or like Instagram book reviews and stuff, and I've unfollowed a lot of them because one, they're all talking about the same thing
Yeah.
and it's boring.
Hmm.
I want the new stuff. Or I want someone to find something old that's
Yeah.
really interesting. Or I'm too freaking busy to hear the record play over and over and over and over again.
Hmm.
This isn't like my favorite song that I have to listen to till I hate it.
Well, or if you had 10 different reviewers talking about the same thing, if you got 10 different perspectives,
Yeah.
that would be great. But when
Yes.
they all say the exact same thing,
Yeah.
you just know they're comparing notes and
Yeah.
in the end just all agreeing with
They are
one
literally
another, and then
copying
their
each other.
audience all agrees with them, and
Yeah.
and it's You know, it's totally artificial
Yes.
is the problem.
And it's okay if it's okay if something's trending and people want to talk about their views on it, but like
Mhm.
have actual views on it.
Yeah,
Don't just copy everybody else's. Like I literally just
exactly.
watched a really interesting YouTube essay. Oh, who was it? Let me look it up real quick because the whole thing was about plagiarism.
Oh yeah.
And literally one of the issues with the hype train is plagiarism
Hmm.
because if you are a YouTuber who doesn't have organic conversation like you and I do,
Hmm.
they write and script all of their stuff and then read it off for their videos or have a teleprompter that reads it to them or whatever, or they memorize it, whatever they end up doing. One of the issues is that when you start taking and referencing other people's contributions to the conversation, it's one thing to paraphrase it, it's another thing to say it verbatim
Yeah.
and actually have the paste monster bite you in the ass.
Hmm.
Oh, what was it though? I want to verbally cite and reference this YouTuber. I gotta go to my recently watched.
And that's a problem with the internet is you read something somewhere and it impresses you, but then when you want to go back and talk about it, now you can't for the life of you remember where you
Yeah.
you even saw it.
H Bomber Guy has a video called Plagiarism and You parentheses tube and parentheses.
Hmm.
It's almost a 4 hour conversation about different examples of YouTube plagiarism and blatant plagiarism from everyone from no names to well-known journalists having their words copied verbatim.
Hmm.
That is the pitfall of this one of the pitfalls of having the hype train
Yeah.
is that there is more room for error and there's also more room for just plagiarizing other people.
Hmm.
And I'm not 100% one of those people who's like, it all has to be original. But at least some of what you say needs to be original. Don't just
Yeah.
keep
Have your own thought.
repeating the same
Or if you don't
stuff.
have an original thought, why are you doing a video?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Are you just doing it to get on the hype train? A
Hmm.
lot of it is also because a lot of people are monetized.
Hmm.
They aren't doing it because they care about the topic. Most of
Yeah.
the people who do a lot of YouTube channels are not like us and have organic conversations. They
Right.
had someone write it for them,
Yeah.
and they're just the presenter.
Well, and most of them that are looking at the YouTube numbers, they have to jump on the hype train because that's what's trending. That's what's going to get their
Mhm.
numbers up.
Yes. So they're just worrying about following the hype train and they're not producing anything good.
Where we don't care. The 9 people of you that are going to watch this video, hey, we love you. All the
Yes.
rest of you can go to hell.
Yes. And that's the whole thing. Like, I think it was Saul Bass who said, don't be original, just be good.
Yeah.
Like, and he was a very famous graphic designer for those of you who don't know who that is. He did the I Heart New York logo, IBM, that kind of stuff.
Think Alfred Hitchcock title sequences.
Yeah, so he was very well renowned and very well known in the United States, probably one of the most copied graphic designers as well.
Yeah.
Um, but he always said, don't try to be original, just try to be good. And I think that's important if you get on the hype train, okay, fine. Do what you have to do if you're monetized and you need those numbers that badly. If
Yeah.
it's not a labor of love for you and you just want to crank it out for the capitalist machine, fine, whatever. People are going to still enjoy it if you're entertaining enough.
Hmm.
But try to make it good.
Hmm.
And a lot of making something good in a medium that is YouTube, and if you're hopping on a hype train, really is coming up with your own thoughts and
Yeah.
perspectives about something.
And
That's it.
once in a while, we read books that are currently popular, like
Hmm.
Legends and Lattes. But on our channel, we're sitting here. We don't have a script in front of us.
Yeah,
We're
and we're
just
not being
talking.
sponsored.
Yeah.
This is a labor of love for us. We would love for it to be more.
But we just say what we think.
Yes, and if it's good, great. If it's not, whatever. If it's not what we expected or how it was advertised, we're gonna say it. If it was shitty design, we're gonna tell you.
Oh, yeah.
And so some things we have hopped on the hype train, but it's because we want to know why there's hype and if we agree.
Hmm.
Not that we're just gonna sit here and blindly agree with other people. And
Yeah.
I just think it's dangerous too, because then if something happens, you have this mob mentality that's gonna come up. because your heroes are going to fail you. That is a normal
Yes.
thing. We have a lot of authors who are in the news for bad reasons lately.
Hmm.
When you hop on the hype train, that is you publicly admitting that you supported this person at one point, and there is nothing wrong with having changed your mind in light of new information.
Hmm.
But at the end of the day, you are now responsible for a lot of other people having supported this person too. Can you live with that?
Yeah.
That's a big question. Like, there's a lot of
Well, and
morality in this.
also we've always from the start of this channel, we've kind of seen reading as a voyage of exploration.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody should have their own individual voyage of exploration. And yes, hype is going to influence some of what you explore, but if all you do is follow what's the latest, greatest thing you're hearing about, there's so much that you're going to be missing out on.
Yes.
You know, books like The Last American, which we recently reviewed. Um, it's a kind of a forgotten early science fiction book by a guy who turns out to have been very prominent in American publishing.
Mm-hmm.
He helped found Life magazine.
Yeah.
You know, it's stuff like that. You don't find those books by following the hype train, especially when that hype train is mostly being controlled by your big publishers, Random
Mm-hmm.
House, Hatchet, um, Titan Books,
Penguin.
things like that.
All them.
Well, Penguin is
Oh
right.
yeah, that's right.
They're
All
the
those
big
those little
conglomeration.
sub conglomerates
You
that they
know,
are.
you're following all those huge publishers and following what they're telling you should be reading and what is the next big thing.
Mm-hmm.
You're missing out on so much
Yes.
that you could be exploring that would be true to who you are.
Yes.
You know, like my friend Samantha, she does read a lot of the current popular stuff, but she in between she's picking up stuff that, you know, I just wonder where she's getting it, but she's getting it from her personal interests
Yes.
and following those and reading them because that's her personal interest, not what other people are telling her she should be
Mm-hmm.
reading or is the next great thing. And so, you know, she'll discover somebody like this Matt Riley, and she got me to read Temple. Um, Pretty good, but definitely not a current big author. He was big in the early 1990s, and
Mm-hmm.
now, well, he is still publishing, but he's not all that well known.
Yes.
And she discovered him because she's following her own personal path through literature. And that's what we do. That's what leads us to find all the stuff that we talk about on Telltale. Some of it is popular, others of it is stuff that nobody has heard of.
Yes.
And I've had people who are, you know, like fans of Stephen King, and I review an early King short story, and they go, I never heard of that one. You know, and they
Mm-hmm.
look it up and dig into it.
Yeah.
And that's the way it should work, is to follow that path on your own and not follow the hype trains.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if the hype describes a book as something that you think does sound really interesting to your personal interests, then go for it.
Yeah.
Or if it describes it and it's something like you've never read before, but you are itching to try something
Mm-hmm.
different, go for it. But don't just always read what everybody else is reading. Don't just always read what is trending now on TikTok.
Yes.
You're not going to discover the best that way.
Yes.
You're only going to discover what somebody's putting a lot of money behind.
Mm-hmm. And one of the biggest thing too is if you're hopping on the hype train, you can't be a trendsetter.
No,
You didn't start it. You're just following a
you're
trend that's
following.
already happening. So
Hmm.
being able to come up with your own ideas, invest in just scanning your local library and reading the back synopsis to see if it's something
Project
good.
Gutenberg.
Project Gutenberg has a ton of free public domain books that are extraordinary.
Hmm.
Um, and that's a lot of time and energy people have put into. Also donate to them. They're amazing. But it's a lot of work that these people are indie book publishers, people who are self-selling. Like, you are missing out on some really great short stories and literature if you're just following what everybody loves.
Or follow Locus Magazine, which reports on the science fiction, fantasy, horror industries, current publishing, and they're nonprofit. So they want your help, first of all. and they also are they're talking about the latest greatest books, but they're not hyping them, and there's a lot of stuff that they review that isn't on the hype train, that
Yeah.
isn't coming from the big publishers. You're going to find some indie stuff. You're going to find some stuff from smaller specialty publishers. You're going to find reviews of the magazines like Analog in there. They review the
Yeah.
short stories.
Hmm.
um, Locus is a great source of information of what's current in the science fiction, fantasy, and horror genre.
Yeah. And I'm one of those people too. Like, one of the ways that I avoid the hype train is I'm a graphic designer, so I do judge books by their cover.
Oh yeah.
But I go to like my local library and just
Hmm.
browse, see what sounds good.
Find the oldest looking book you can find in the library.
What you can even go to your librarian and ask what's the like least checked out book in this whole
Yeah.
library, and in the fiction, let's say fiction or something, because otherwise you're going to end up with a textbook and maybe you're not interested in that. Or like I go to thrift stores a lot and I just look at the cover, see what's interesting, what's in what genres, read the back synopsis, see what tickles my fancy, just browsing. I also like looking at like classic literature lists. Goodreads, for all its flaws, has some really great literature lists in
Hmm.
genres and classics and all kinds of stuff. So
Hmm.
I can go through there and be like, oh, there's a classic I never read. I should probably, try and invest in that. That sounds really interesting. But
Hmm.
I don't look at things that are outside of me unless I'm looking to explore something new. Or I ask my friends, what are you guys reading? Or what have you read that really influenced you as a person?
Hmm.
There are even some authors that have great interviews giving off lists of books that have influenced their lives for whatever reason, or their favorite fiction, or favorite authors in general.
Or go to small local bookstores that have an author coming and signing books and
Yeah,
find out about that book. You might find something you really like.
absolutely. Or go to your local bookstore and ask the bookkeeper who's there, like, what have you been reading lately? Like,
Hmm.
a lot of them aren't hopping on the hype train.
Yeah.
But some of them are because, that's part of their job.
Hmm.
But at the end of the day, there's so much more literature out there.
I think if you go into the smaller bookstores, you don't get so much of the hype
Yeah.
train. If you go to Barnes and Noble, you're gonna, they're gonna show you this stuff that's
Mm-hmm.
currently being pushed by the publishers.
Yeah.
But flip side of that whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
and of course, we are both experienced marketing professionals, being graphic designers. We have
Mm-hmm.
worked for marketing departments. We know that you don't hear about a book if nobody pushes it, if nobody talks about it, if nobody puts it on social media, if
Mm-hmm.
nobody puts advertising out there. Nobody's ever going to know about it,
Yeah.
which is particularly bad for indie authors. How do they get known?
Yes.
There's a lot of them. I mean, I've subscribed to a couple of things that do push indie authors, and you can get free ebooks from them, which is
Mm-hmm.
great, but
Mm-hmm.
they're not making money off a free ebook.
No.
But at least they're getting their name known a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
which is really, 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 really spectacularly difficult right now.
Yeah.
And so, by following those things, they can get their name out there. But otherwise, it's really hard for them to get their name out there and
Mm-hmm.
get their stuff promoted. It's really hard for them to hype their books, which is why it's, to have the big publishers kind of in charge of all that hype.
Yeah.
They're pushing right now. There are a lot of people who will tell you they're pushing a specific political agenda,
Mm-hmm.
and it really does look that way. And there are a lot of fans in the genres that are getting tired of the Hugos and Nebulas always pushing the same kinds of books by the same kinds of authors
Mm-hmm. And
and
also
other types of authors.
attempting to be rigged all the time too.
Yeah.
Like this wouldn't happen if we had a diversified thing where all
But we
parties involved.
Yeah,
No.
but right now, in the name of diversity, we don't have diversity because
Yeah. Now they're
there are
pushing the other
authors that are
way.
being rejected from Worldcon
Mm-hmm.
because they're not, you
Because
know,
they're straight white men.
yeah.
Let's just be real. And I'm a queer identifying person too, and I get sick of that as well.
Hmm.
Because like I literally had a client not too long ago who basically told me to my face, it's like, yeah, we're looking to try and hire more female queer people in my industry. And I was like, cool. But then after I thought about it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I am a bunch of check boxes. I am a stereotype. I'm not I potentially am not being asked to do work for my merit.
Hmm.
I am being asked to do
They don't
work
want you because
because,
you're good. They
yeah,
want you
because I'm
because you
queer
got
and
a
a
label.
woman. And I'm like, shit. Like, that's not helping me or anybody. Yeah, it's giving me experience, but like, if I'm not doing good work, we're just gonna have a thankfully, it's not come to that at this point. It's been a
Yeah.
very good working relationship. They're very happy with my work.
Hmm.
But at the end of the day, like, they were specifically looking for those check boxes
Hmm.
in people they were looking to hire on to
Yeah.
freelance for them. And I'm like, this gets dangerous.
Hmm.
And this is like really this there's a lot of gray area in this practice, but it's starting to look a little darker. The darker end of the gray area.
Yeah.
It's like, yay for me, I'm being represented, but also, oh my gosh, I am that stereotype.
I don't I don't
I don't
like
want that.
the conservative view of this whole issue,
Mm-hmm.
but I am starting to roll my eyes at every time I read something from a publisher about a new book. It starts out saying this new queer adventure. It's like, why does it have to be queer? Why
Yeah.
do you have to tell me that it's queer?
Can't you just
Can
say
it
it's
be
a
a
fun
good book?
adventure and if it happens to have queer people in it, like,
Yeah. Why does
if we're
that
gonna get
have
to
to be?
normalizing it.
Why does it have to be queer to get published?
Yeah,
You
and
know.
if we're looking to normalize that, like, a lot of people think this is controversial, but Morgan Freeman himself have come out and said, we need to stop calling me a black actor. I'm
Hmm.
an actor.
Hmm.
We need to stop calling them queer authors or queer literature.
Hmm.
They are authors, and it is literature. If we're going to normalize it, we can't. It's like putting a big red flag on it saying, hate this book.
Yeah.
Like, we got to trap them into loving the book and then loving us as queer people. Like, I don't know.
And we got
Like,
to
it
open
just
our
doesn't seem
minds
to work to
to
me.
alternative ideas.
Absolutely.
We have to have authors that we disagree with.
Mm-hmm.
That's,
Yeah, that's important.
that's the only way democracy works, is you
Mm-hmm.
have to have a pool of ideas, differing ideas, contradictory ideas, and
Mm-hmm.
look at it all and find the merits in all of those ideas
Yes.
and try to distill out the best for our plan for moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way it works. The same should be for our literature. It should represent a wide variety of ideologies,
Mm-hmm.
even the ones you disagree with.
Yes. Because, like, you don't learn from anything that just keeps agreeing with
No,
you. Like, I'm definitely a big proponent of
found a
that.
one hand clapping.
I have read a lot of things that would have disgusted me. I read 120 Days of Sodom. That was gross. I
Hmm.
hated it.
Hmm.
But I know how sex traffickers think now way better than I ever
Yeah.
thought I would.
Yeah.
I've read Mein Kampf
Hmm.
because Hitler's an evil man. How do we learn about how he became that way?
Yeah.
And I have read a lot of things, both pro and pro and against cancel culture,
Hmm.
because there is two edges to every sword. Like there's good and bad to all of these situations because we're humans
Hmm.
building constructs that have the potential to be imperfect. There's nothing we can make that is fully perfect.
Right.
And so at the end of the day,
Well, and we're never going to have everybody agreeing with one another. That's
exactly.
just ridiculous.
But how do you, and at my biggest thing is how do people reinforce their values without hearing the arguments against it?
Hmm.
How do you get a stronger sense of argument for your values and for your morality and for what you believe
Hmm.
if you don't hear all of the arguments against it?
Right. Oh, and we got to someday read together and
Mm-hmm.
talk about The Lathe of Heaven.
Yes.
There's a portion in that where
Mm-hmm.
the main character, who he's able to change the world by dreaming about it, by dreaming
Ooh,
what he wants to have happen.
interesting.
And he dreams that he wants a world of equality.
Mm-hmm.
And when he wakes up, everybody and everything is completely neutral gray.
It's all the same. All the
And
same.
so Le Guin was making that point that if you go too far with that, you end up with a world where there is no diversity anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is exactly the same as everything else, and there's
Yes.
no innovation, there's no ideas, there's no growth, there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing to learn.
Yeah.
It's just all the same.
Yes. And that is the issue you also run into with the hype train is when a lot of people like something or the average person likes it, sometimes it literally is just average.
Yeah.
And that's something you're going to run into. Like
Hmm.
I had actually Thankfully, I was wrong, but I had not read Stephen King purposefully because he has so many freaking books and so many people like him. I was on that train of like, he's probably just really average and people just like his work. Thankfully, I was wrong,
Hmm.
but I took that chance to find out.
I used to do that too. For many, many, many years, I never watched E.T.
Yeah.
simply because it was so popular when it
Yeah.
came out.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, if it's that popular, it's got to be crap.
Yeah. Well, like I have, my husband keeps making fun of me because I've not watched all of the Back to the Futures in their entirety. I've seen clips of them, and I know it's just not my thing.
Yeah.
Like, I've watched like the whole beginning half of at least maybe the beginning third of each movie, and
Hmm.
I'm just not interested. It didn't catch
Okay.
me within that time. I have no desire to continue watching it. I gave it a shot for each one of those films, but it's just not my thing. And every time people are like, "Oh, and Back to the Future," I'm like, I didn't see the whole thing, so I'm not sure. But like, I don't it didn't catch me in the first third. Why would I want to waste my life watching the rest of it?
Yeah. I liked them,
Yeah.
but I also don't like how every time you mention time travel, that's all anybody talks about.
Yes.
There's so many other great time travel stories that
Exactly.
have been done,
Yeah.
including movies like Predestination.
Mm,
That was good.
really good one. I love that movie. But then there's also this culture of shame that we start building around the hype train
Hmm.
too. That all these people are reading it, and when you haven't, people sit there and are like, "Oh man, you're really missing out." They make you feel badly
Hmm.
for not liking it or not having experienced it when
Hmm.
you're allowed to choose that for yourself.
And we have something else kind of interesting happening in publishing right now,
Mm-hmm.
where we have these small press publishers
Mm-hmm.
like Suntop
Mm-hmm.
that are becoming wildly successful, and they're able to sell their books for ridiculous amounts of money. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, a single
They're
book for
gorgeous.
$2,000.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that they shouldn't be succeeding in their business,
Mm-hmm.
but it's making a lot of people feel who can't possibly ever afford that book.
Mm-hmm.
It's making a lot of people feel bad about not being able to get it because everybody else is getting it and saying how great it is.
Mm-hmm. And you run into these people too. Like there's an issue of what's the word I'm looking for? Accessibility
Okay.
that comes with that.
Yeah.
Just because people are on the hype train, great. Accessibility, though, in literature is an issue.
Hmm.
Literacy in our nation is an issue.
Hmm.
So to sit there and build guilt and shame around people who haven't read or seen something, there might be more than one layer involved in that conversation.
Yeah.
It might be they can't afford Netflix to watch that show. Their
Exactly.
family's living in poverty and barely able to make ends meet.
Hmm.
Or their library hasn't gotten it because it's so hyped up they don't get access to it even though they have a library card.
Hmm.
Or they have an issue with reading because of a learning disorder that they never had, or the school systems are having a hard time keeping teachers happy, keeping them involved, getting kids engaged in the classroom. There's so many layers around guilt and shame.
Yeah, and there's even some works by popular authors
Yeah.
that are only getting published in this limited editions
Yeah.
that cost $400 or $500 these days.
Accessibility issue.
And so now even though it's an author that you really love and follow, you can never read that work because you just don't have that kind of money to be buying that book.
Absolutely.
And it's only published in 250 copies, so after 3 days it's sold out. Sorry, you
Yeah.
you can't be cool because you can't afford and can't get on the internet fast enough to get one of those 250 copies. It's like
Mhm.
you can't win a gold ticket, so you can't have the Willy Wonka
Yeah.
experience.
Yes.
It's that's the wrong way to go. That's the wrong
Mhm.
way for hype to be used to make people feel bad because they aren't lucky enough
Yeah.
to be able to get a copy.
And there are some people too who are just really fine with minimalism in their life too. They don't feel like they
Yeah,
need all those things.
right.
So setting up a guilt and shame around a value that they have, like it just develops a really toxic culture
Hmm.
in literature. And literature was meant to be there for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we're always talking about Project Gutenberg
Yeah.
because, yeah, I have some first edition copy that I paid $100 for, but you can get it for absolutely free and it's all the same words
Yeah. It's the exact same piece of
and
literature.
it's in the public domain. So if you
Hmm.
wanted to, you could take it and publish your own limited edition copy.
Yeah. Bind your own version of it. I
Mhm.
mean, there's even a culture now that, like a subculture of bookbinding fanfics
Mm-hmm.
for yourself. Like
Yeah.
there's ethics that go into that too, but like
And then again, most people don't have the skill to do that.
yes, but again, when you start talking about hype, it even acts it starts infiltrating other like subgenres of literature as well. Or
Hmm.
like fan fiction and that sort of thing.
Hmm.
And again, you're running into the accessibility issue.
Yeah.
Like it's just an ongoing conversation. So sure, the hype train, it gets publicity out there. We know we're part of the capitalist machine. We know that consumerism is a thing. But there are very few, I feel, booktubers who are not trying to monetize in some
Hmm.
form or another. So you
Hmm.
know that everything they're doing is backed by dollars.
Yeah.
So when that starts becoming an incentive, you may not actually be getting an honest review either.
Possibly.
So,
And you're not getting you're definitely not getting an original review when you've got a whole group of different booktubers talking about the same book at the same time and all saying the same
mhm,
thing about it.
yeah.
You know that they've all compared notes and agreed this is what we're going to push out there.
Hmm. Yeah.
And that's just another hype train. And sure, it's great that they're using that to try and promote older authors that aren't currently in print.
Hmm.
But I've noticed that within months of that happening, all of a sudden one of the publishers has new editions coming out.
Funny how that
Yeah,
happens.
especially considering how long it takes to get a book to print.
Yeah, for real.
It's like somebody's pulling a string behind the scenes here. Maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but
Hmm.
that's the way it looks.
And it that speaks to brand as well, though, coming
Mhm.
from our marketing background as well. When you start making your clientele suspicious that there are strings being pulled, that becomes part of your brand.
Yeah.
That builds your reputation.
Hmm.
Do you want to have that potential for negativity a part of your brand forever?
Yeah.
It's the same thing with YouTubers. Do you want
Mhm.
that negativity for plagiarism in your brand? Do you want that negativity for
Copyright
hopping
infringement.
on the hype train and not having original thoughts and basically repeating what everybody else says? Do you want that in that as a straight as a thread in your brand?
Yeah. Is that a lot of times we don't have anything more than the two of us sitting here talking because what we're talking about, if we threw artwork up there from it, we would be infringing copyrights. And we
Hmm.
try to be sensitive to that
Yes.
and not step on anybody's copyrights, authors or artists,
Yes.
because as artists and designers ourselves, we wouldn't want people stealing our work.
Absolutely.
So we may not be 100% perfect about that, but we try to be sensitive to it and avoid it. And so that's why our videos don't have these multimedia experiences going on,
Hmm.
because I'm sorry, the other people who are doing that, they are not shooting it and creating it and drawing it themselves.
Yes.
They're stealing it off the internet.
Yes.
And the legality of that is very questionable.
Hmm. And we want to promote good literature. So following the hype of something does not necessarily mean it's going to be good.
Yeah.
It's never a guarantee. And art is subjective. But
Hmm.
what we have branded ourselves and positioned ourselves in a manner that we want good stories with good world building, good character building. We have hit these standards. And when something just falls short of that, it's not on our top tail list.
Yeah.
Not that it's a bad book, but it's just not something that we think is the best of the best.
But we also do try to say who's going to like a story,
Yes.
even if we didn't care for it.
Exactly. If we didn't prefer it, we can see other people, either in our friend groups or, different genre lovers would
Hmm.
really enjoy something.
Hmm.
So it's worth
So
the
we're not
conversation.
trying to just push the stuff that we like. We're also trying to just create a guide that you can find the works that maybe you might like.
Yes.
We can't know absolutely, but we can try to steer you towards
Hmm.
your path in literature, which, nobody in publishing is trying to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. They're trying to influence you to buy their shit.
Yeah.
And sometimes it is shit. Sometimes it's great. Sometimes it's just shit.
Hmm. Yeah. Sometimes it's
Can't
shit in
avoid
a
it.
really pretty package.
Hmm. Yeah. And advertising is, nobody is above being influenced.
Hmm.
But as consumers, we are responsible for how we are influenced.
Hmm.
So I think a lot of the time too, with the hype train, we put so much responsibility on authors or our YouTubers or, you know, people who seem larger than us, when at the end of the day, we are the ones responsible for how we are influenced. And
Hmm.
we have to live with ourselves and the consequences of how we are influenced.
Yeah.
So,
And you just have to be when faced with book talk or booktube or bookstagram, you just have to be skeptical.
mm,
Like everything else, like every other claim anybody is trying to make, you need to be skeptical
mhm.
about it and investigate and try to decide if it's really something you want to waste your time on.
Yep.
And be honest with yourself. If you try it and it's just not good, don't tell your friends that you enjoyed it just because your friends loved it.
Hmm.
Be honest and say, that just wasn't for me. I didn't care for it at
Yeah.
all.
And don't feel like you have to justify yourself either. It's your life.
Yeah.
It's your life. If you
Don't
didn't
follow
waste,
don't
yeah.
follow the peer pressure, don't follow the hype, which is just a really, really bigger form of peer pressure.
And don't dehumanize people for liking something you hate.
Yeah.
That's really important.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Because
it's there's so much life outside of the escapism of literature. These are the least of our problems.
because I
Hmm.
feel like hype has also worked in a negative way against classic science fiction.
Oh,
That there
absolutely.
lately has been a lot of hype characterizing classic science fiction as sexist and lacking in characters, lacking in good writing skills, lacking in plotting skills,
Racist
lacking in world building. And
and
yes,
racist.
we've found examples of all that within older science fiction, but
Hmm.
we've also found a lot of examples to the contrary,
Yes.
examples where
I would
women
say a
are,
majority to the contrary.
well, we haven't read a majority yet.
Yeah.
There is a lot
Well,
of
from what we
bad
have
science
read,
fiction.
yeah, from
Yeah,
what we have read, it has not been a very frequent thing.
yeah. We have read stories that have had strong women characters that were written in the
Hmm.
early
Healthy
1930s.
married couples fighting the odds on other worlds.
We have read stories by Isaac Asimov,
Hmm.
which point out the issues of race relations
Yep.
in 1939 and 1940. Um, we've, recently read a story from the 60s that
Hmm.
was very anti-racism
Yep. Yep.
from one of the earliest of science fiction writers,
Hmm.
Frederick Pohl, one of the earliest science fiction writers,
Yep.
and one of the really, really old golden age people.
Hmm.
And in 1967, he published In Dangerous Visions, a story that was extremely clear statement against racism.
Sorry, I think it's Slim Pump keeps.
It has been making me mad that I kept hearing again and again and again classic science fiction is so bad. People try it and they say they didn't like it because it wasn't this, it wasn't that. Yeah, it wasn't Brandon Sanderson, it wasn't Adrian Tchaikovsky. It was
Mhm.
written way before them. It laid the
But these were,
groundwork
yeah,
for those
these were the
people,
foundations
you know.
that
And it
the genre was built on. Yeah.
and it if you approach it with an open mind, you can see things in there that are brilliant and that are different from anything being done today,
Yeah.
but are still really, really great stories in their own right, in their
Absolutely.
own time,
Yeah.
and worth rereading today.
And as a queer female too, I've been very, very pleasantly surprised by the genre myself.
Hmm.
And I mean, we've even stepped out of science fiction quite a bit and have seen also examples of sexism and racism in a lot of just regular fiction and in fantasy. Like a lot of that stuff is it's blatant and it's there.
Hmm.
So we can't one that's one of the things that I always hated about that the negativity of the hype train too is you can't say it's something prominent in one version of the genres, like
Yeah.
in the genre, when all the genres are just as much at fault
Yeah.
in doing so. In fact, even more so. Like, there's a lot of historical fiction. Yeah, there's gonna be racism and sexism because people were racist and sexist. Like, it's a product of its time.
Hmm.
And people are not being thoughtful when they're reading. They just want to be entertained. And you
Right.
have to look at things in context a
Hmm.
lot of the time, too. And, like, fine, if you just want to be entertained, great. That's whatever. Whatever helps you sleep at night.
Hmm.
But at the end of the day, the hype train, you miss out on a lot of good literature that brings up a lot of really interesting and fantastic points. But yeah, it's a hard read.
Hmm.
So,
Okay, so I think we've pretty much exhausted that
we've,
subject.
yeah,
Um,
we're no longer hyping the hype train. But I mean, I don't want to hate on any YouTubers too. We get it. Some people are just trying to make a dollar. We're living in weird economic times. It's hard on everyone. And we all
but
have a labor of love we want to invest into.
but there are some of them that can easily be criticized. There's I forget what channel did it. They took snippets. They were just doing this past week. They
Mm-hmm.
took pieces from 2001: A Space Odyssey, and they
Yeah.
did voiceovers
Yeah.
where they're talking about other science fiction booktubers, and they're just ripping on these people. It is hilarious, and it's all the funnier because they're really damningly right about these booktubers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, some of them well, there's one very prominent one who really, when he started his channel, he knew jack shit about science fiction, and he's claiming himself to be the biggest thing, and he still is constantly, um,
I've never heard of this guy.
yeah.
He founded the channel.
Someone
Yeah.
sends him a book. I never heard of this book and never heard of the author, and it's a classic of science fiction. It's
It's
like,
like,
what are you
this
doing
is
claiming
important.
to know, to be the
Yeah.
biggest science fiction channel when
Sometimes,
you don't even
though,
know what you're talking about?
that's fun to watch. Like, there used to be this TV show
Oh yeah, it's a
called
great train wreck.
Idiot, yeah, Idiot Abroad, where they basically take the whitest, most, like, rigid, average dude and just shove him, like, in Egypt.
Hmm.
And it's like, now experience the culture. And he's just sitting here like, this is stupid. Or like, sometimes he has fun. But for the most part, he's just like, I have no idea what's going on. I don't know. I don't know words. Like, people don't talk. And he's just fumbling about and constantly, like, it's very funny. But sometimes I feel like that's what BookTube also ends up doing is there's a lot
Yeah.
of people who are just like,
No, and there's another channel that there's one channel that is very much stuck on British science fiction in the 60s because
hmm
that's what he grew up with.
yeah.
And that's great. He's got a lot of
And that's
um,
true to himself.
great reviews of that period of science fiction, but he puts down all the rest of it,
Yeah.
and constantly blows his own horn on
hmm
how much he knows and how important he is and how everybody should be listening to him. And this other channel I'm talking about just totally ripped him a new one about
Yeah.
that because the guy, great, he's been around. He doesn't know more than people like me who've been reading it my
He just
whole
has a
life.
preference.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing too. Art is any art is objective
Hmm.
or is subjective. Sorry. We can't look at things objectively.
Hmm.
Like it is so we have so much personal baggage we bring to everything we encounter.
Hmm.
And you can't just walk away from it and say it's the best thing ever. What's
Right.
the best thing for you?
Yeah.
And good for you.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Don't
Hmm.
shit on everybody else's
Exactly.
experiences when yours was limited.
Hmm.
And nothing wrong with having limited experience either. But people have experiences that are outside of yours, and you are allowed to like what you like and not like what you don't like. And that's the danger of the hype trains. It only helps
Yeah.
a select few find
That's
what they
that's
actually
the way it
like.
works with BookTube, is that if somebody like that does become successful on BookTube and have a lot of followers, now all of a sudden everybody's listening to what they're saying, reading the books that they're talking about, not reading the books that they say they shouldn't be reading, and now
Mhm.
they've set the taste, they've become gatekeepers for everything.
Yeah.
And they're totally ignoring the fact that there are other books that those people would probably like if they didn't have this person telling them what to do.
Again, and that goes into as we cannot give so much merit to the influencers, we have to take responsibility for how we are influenced.
Hmm.
again. Like, I just am so sick of this culture that wants to, like, extend blame to everybody else. Sometimes you are the problem.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes it's nobody else's fault but yours.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to sit down and live with that.
Mm-hmm.
So quit blaming everybody else for things and stuff like that too. That's why I'm just I'm a discerning reader, and I'm a
Yeah.
discerning person, and like I just don't understand limiting yourself that way.
Mm-hmm. But
But
it's just the
I
danger
don't need
of
safety
the
too.
more
Like, it's
popular
weird.
channels that they suddenly have that ability to be the hypers,
Yeah.
not the hype, not the people following, but now all of a sudden they have the
They drink with
ability to
power.
set the taste,
Yeah.
and so whatever they talk up, whatever they hype, is now going to be what everybody's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And in some cases, it's a good thing, like if they're hyping Dangerous Visions, hey, I'm sorry, it is a great
Yeah,
anthology.
it is fantastic. Good for them.
It's amazing. And, everybody who cares about science fiction should at least give it a try.
Mm-hmm.
May not be for you. It's not, it's 1960s. It's not for everyone.
Yeah.
But
It's
it
worth a
was
try.
great in 1967 and worth reading. But, not everybody should read
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And, it just shouldn't be held up as this is the greatest anthology ever. It totally revolutionized everything.
The Bible.
No other anthology
Yeah.
had more importance in science fiction, and you have to read. That's bullshit.
Yeah.
This is all for fun. This is
Mm-hmm.
entertainment. Read what you want.
Mm-hmm.
Don't read what somebody else tells you have to read.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we try to steer towards trying to figure out who's going to like the story, even if
Yes.
we don't like it,
Yes.
and
Exactly.
and advising who we think might gain some entertainment value from a book, because it
Mm-hmm.
is just entertainment, guys.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. There's so much life happening, unless it's like a biography or autobiography.
Yeah.
I mean, the influence is just be discerning about how you are influenced, is
Hmm.
really what it all comes down to. Literature is literature. It can be informative, it can be educational, it can be complete lies and pass itself off as informative.
Hmm.
But as a reader, you just need to be discerning, and the hype train is not always where what you're looking for is.
Right.
Sometimes it's just fun to hear about it, but after about two opinions saying the same thing, I'm usually done.
Yeah.
But
Well, you don't need more. You heard it.
yeah.
You've got that opinion.
Well, we better stop because my legs have gone numb now.
Okay.
So yeah, we subscribe, let us know what you felt was hyped and sucked. We would love to hear about it in the comments. I will full disclosure, hated the Hunger Games. They were not good, but oh well. So yeah, give us your commentary on things that were hyped that you didn't like. Any hype train things that or opinions that you have, feel free to comment them below. Please be respectful of one another. Like, subscribe. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.